Why is it important that people understand long-term care claims? Well, my partner, Evan Schwartz, did a nice little overview of long-term care claims, and you can find it on our website. While Evan gave a great overview, I want to give you an interview and share some details about what I believe to be the most critical phase of making a long-term care claim. Long-term care insurance policies pay a daily benefit for people who can no longer take care of themselves. So, why am I doing this interview? Well, it's because I've seen so many meritorious claims that have been denied due to a lot of simple errors made by the claimants in the initial application process. What are some of the biggest mistakes I see people making on the application process? Well, to answer that question, I'm going to have to give you a little bit of background. You see, the claim model of most major long-term care insurance companies is, once they receive notice of claim, they'll set up an in-home assessment. This in-home assessment is really, really critical. This is because it's the first time that the insurance company is going to see or understand the nature and extent of the insured's disabilities, whether it's cognitive or physical. These in-home assessments are performed, by and large, by registered nurses, and most of them are really just punching a clock. They're third-party nurses. They're hired by the insurance company to go out and perform these in-home assessments. And they just want to get the assessment completed so they can move on to their next assessment and earn their paycheck. Now, the registered nurses, and by the way, most of them are registered nurses, follow a pre-printed questionnaire. They're designed to elicit the insured's ability to perform essentially two things: whether they're physically incapable of taking care of themselves or cognitively or mentally incapable of taking care of themselves. So I'm going to break that down in answer to the question. All policies provide that you will be entitled to long-term care benefits if you're unable to perform the following activities of daily living: bathing, continence, dressing, eating, toileting, or transfer. Some of them have 7 activities of daily living, others have 6, but all of them have one thing in common: it's your inability to perform 2 of the activities of daily living. If you can demonstrate that you're incapable of performing 2 of the activities of daily living, well, you have yourself a pretty sustainable claim. But it's really important prior to this interview that you have a copy of, or at least understand, what the activities of daily living are in your policy. The other way the long-term care insurance will pay you is if you have a cognitive impairment, which requires substantial supervision to protect you or others from threats to your own or others' safety. All right, pretty broad definition. And one of the things that I run into most often is the people applying for this benefit are older. They're either part of the greatest generation or they're born soon thereafter, and they're reluctant to admit their own infirmities. Well, if you're going to do one of these interviews, you don't want the person applying for the insurance benefits to be a hero. I've seen people that could barely walk, that needed help to get out of an easy chair, and the registered nurse doing the initial in-home assessment says, "Well, are you able to get out of a chair?" And the in-home assessment interviewee will say, "Yeah, no problem, I can get out of a chair." It's not doing him any good. So I think you have to let the person that's being interviewed know that it's okay to admit their weaknesses. This is why they purchased insurance. And as to a cognitive decline, well, the script followed by these registered nurses only pick up some of the most severe cases of dementia. And while you can have pretty significant dementia that requires other people to watch over you and protect you from threats to your own health or safety, I think this test isn't really good at discriminating about this. The in-home assessment really isn't adequate to assess someone's ability to protect themselves, or others. And I think it's really critical, if you've got cognitive issues, to get yourself a good neuropsychological evaluation, and perhaps even a letter from a neurologist stating that you require, or the insured requires, substantial supervision to protect him or her from threats to her own health or safety, or health or safety of others. So don't be a hero, and be prepared. What kind of questions should the insured be prepared to answer with the cognitive questions? Well, that's a great question in and of itself. Maybe I stated this before, but the in-home assessments really fall flat in this regard. Really, someone who is severely cognitively impaired will still be able to answer what year it is, what season it is, what day, what month, the state in which they live. And yet at the same time, they'll leave the rice boiling on the burner. They'll forget to close their front door. They're incapable of walking out their front door without returning home. The tests, the initial in-home assessment test that's given to the insured, will not discriminate about someone who is completely unable to name, say for instance, the capital of New York, and someone who wanders off from home and there's a silver alert issued looking for this person wandering. So again, I want to emphasize, I think it's critical when you're making a long-term care claim that you have a neuropsychological being neuro, N-E-U-R-O, psychological, P-S-Y, psychological assessment by a qualified neuropsychologist evaluating the insured's danger to himself or others. If you're making a long-term care claim based on your cognitive ability, you really need the neuropsychological assessment more than anything else, and the backing of a good neurologist to say that you're a danger to yourself or others due to your cognitively impaired state. So once the claim is approved, what kind of issues do you see? Well, the great thing is once you get past the initial home evaluation, it's as rare as a kangaroo in a dinner jacket to see any kind of follow-up. That's why the initial in-home evaluation is so very critical. But I do see issues. And one of the most common issues that I see is where you have a reimbursement policy. Long-term care policies fall into two groups. There's a cash policy that'll just pay you a monthly amount of cash every month in the event that you satisfy the standards of disability set forward in the long-term care claim. And then you have a reimbursement policy. And the reimbursement policies are really a hobgoblin because they just don't pay enough to pay for an accredited in-home caretaker. And so what I'm seeing a lot of in my practice is that to hire an accredited in-home caretaker costs a little bit more per month than an unaccredited in-home caretaker. And so I have a lot of people calling me saying, can't I pay this individual person They've taken care of my friends, they're well qualified, and I'll ask them, I say, well, are they licensed by the state to provide in-home care? And they go, well, no. And a lot of times I have to tell the client, based on the policy, there's really not much I can do for it because it's in the policy and it's pretty clear. So I see that a lot. Another issue that I see a lot of, and it shouldn't be surprising that as people age, they start to fail to take care of their long-term care insurance premiums. There's a lot of states out there that require that the long-term care premium notice not only goes to the insured, but someone else who's well trusted. But a lot of these policies are about 20 years old. And so addresses change, premiums don't get paid. And when my clients go to make a claim, they'll find out that, in the past 2 years, no premium payment has been made on their policy. That's a huge issue. It's one that you can overcome in certain circumstances, but not always. And then finally, the last issue that I see is notice of claim. And folks, let me tell you, notice of claim is absolutely critical. Once you become entitled to long-term care benefits, whether it's due to a physical disability or a cognitive disability, it's really critical that you give the long-term care insurance carrier notice of claim. And it really depends on what state you're in, but in a lot of states, failure to give the long-term care insurance carrier prompt notice of claim will vitiate any obligation the carrier has to pay the claim. So those are the big issues that I notice once a claim is approved. And I'll see that coming back. You didn't pay the premium, you didn't give prompt notice of claim, you don't have a qualified or accredited caregiver.